Good evening, everyone. So I'm coming to you because many have asked the whole, why embrace your ugly? And even when I wear my t-shirts and, you see the whole embrace your ugly. And of course, for those who don't know, ugly simply means to be unique, genuine love, and simply you, the U.G.L.Y. And so I can identify with this because I know what it's like to be called ugly. From the big head, the big lips, the big nose, not wearing what everybody else wore, not being able to get my hair like everybody else's, all the typical things. But also embrace your ugly is something that I had to learn how to do because so many ugly situations happened in my life. And I'm going to give you like one particular incident, not incident, but circumstance in my life. And I had to ask myself a question late in my 30s, even though this happened like when I was like 2, 3 years old. It wasn't until I got in my 30s that I literally heard this little small voice say, "Who's your puppet master?" And it sounds strange, but I'm going to explain it. So like when I was like 2, 3, one of the earlier incidents of being molested and being violated as a child, and there are several, but there's this one that sticks out in my mind. And yeah, he was very weird, just thought it was okay to sleep with a 2-year-old, 3-year-old. And he would say little things like if I said anything, that my dad would go to jail. So if I told my parents, my dad would go to jail, and that he wanted to teach me how to play mama and daddy the right way. And if I said anything, I wouldn't be able to go play with my cousins. And so years and years had passed. I'm not aligning the things in my life with what had happened to me as a child. So a lot of times people told me I had anger issues, that I was mean, that I was hateful. My self-esteem was basically on the floor, and it did not help that my father was very abusive to my mother. And so I just would say whatever, screaming, because that's the only way I kind of figured to communicate, because I didn't know how to release what had taken place. As I got older, I wouldn't say I was promiscuous, but I was. And it always felt like, if you've ever been molested, I always feel like you got this little thing on your forehead, like a sign. And if one person does it, then it just seems like everybody that comes your way has that spirit about them. It's almost like you can smell it. It's almost like you can feel it. And so a couple of years ago, one of my cousins called me, and she was in tears. And she had begun to explain that her father had passed away. Well, her father was one of my violators. He was one of the men who molested me. And here she is, and she's crying, and she's in tears. And tears start to run down my face. And I realized we have 2 young ladies on the phone grieving one person for completely different reasons. And I just remember trying to hold it together because she needed me to hold it together. And I'm trying to give her the information that I can and things that she needs to do to proceed forward, to make sure that, he's buried properly. And all this stuff sounds so good as it's coming out, but my heart is breaking. And as she's talking, I no longer see myself, the adult me, but I see this little girl that's brokenhearted. Like I literally saw myself back at this house in Sanford, Florida, remembering everything that he had ever done to me. And when I got off the phone with her, I made sure she was okay. I got off the phone. My husband wasn't even at the house at the time. And I was just me and my kids, and I couldn't stop crying. I just crying. And I lay out on the floor, and I remember saying, "God, you got to do something about this." And I started to get mad, and I started to get angry, and like this stuff was just bubbling like a volcano. Emotions that I had never had about this situation. Emotions that I had never had about this incident or any other incident that had happened to me, to my knowledge. And it all started to come up. Fear, anxiety, and I'm laying on the floor, and I'm crying, and I'm angry because I'm crying. And I heard this little small voice, like, my heart, my mind, my spirit, everything. And it was like, "Who's your puppet master?" And I was like, "What? No, what I don't understand is why I'm crying." I'm like talking and communicating back with myself. And I couldn't shake that question. Who's your puppet master? I could not let it go. And I started to think, as I got into bed that night, my husband had made it home, and I had told him what had happened and why I was upset. And my mom actually drove over an hour because she had never verbally heard me say it, that I had been molested. And the next day I sat in my car and tears were just running down my face. And I was like, I don't understand why I'm crying. I don't miss him. And it dawned on me that I'm never going to get an apology. I'm never going to get an I'm sorry. I'm never going to get a why did you do this to me? I'll never get those things. And I'll never get the time back that people said I was mean and hateful and angry and fast in the tail when they didn't even understand that all this was a cry for help. I'll never get those things back. But what I didn't understand is the whole who's your puppet master question. And then it's like my mind took me back to decisions and choices that I had made based off things that had been planted in me like a seed. And some of the things we plant are watered intentionally and unintentionally. And the fears and the anxiety continued to grow where I didn't really trust men. And I wanted to dominate and control whatever environment I was in because I remember not being able to say no or not knowing how to say no. And I sat in my car and I said, what do I do with this? Because this is serious. And I looked over my life, and because so many women in my family had been molested and had been violated, and I often teach my clients that a lot of you don't have generational curses. You just have generational silence. Break the silence, break the curse. None of us had discussed, I mean, from my grandmother down, incidences of being molested and raped and in abusive relationships, and nobody ever talked about it. So nobody ever said nothing. And it was like, now I need you to embrace it. And I was like, how am I gonna do this? Embrace what? This man is one of them. And I had to literally find myself going into this thing and changing it and covering it, embracing it with love. And it wasn't easy because, see, he gone. Whatever was going to happen to him done happened to him, but I'm still here. And it dawned on me that a lot of my actions were controlled by a person who wasn't even in my vicinity, but had left a seed in me. And the seed started to grow in ways, and it masked itself. And I didn't even realize it. I didn't even realize the anger had set like it set. I didn't even realize the anxieties and the fears had set like they had set because I had kept everything at bay. And that's when I learned that you got to grieve a thing, honey. You got to allow yourself to feel how you're going to feel in that moment. I had carried this around for over 30 years. I remember the first person that ever came in contact with me in that manner. And even when he died, I was just like, I didn't know how I felt. And then the second one, I saw him. He went to prison. And he had gotten out. Again, he's another father of one of my cousins. And I had known nothing. I didn't know how I was supposed to feel. And I hear stories of my cousins. And I hear story of different people. And my cousins, and they all, everybody's looking for it. Love and trying to understand this thing. But it wasn't until I took the love and I wholeheartedly wrapped it around the very thing that was sent to destroy me, mentally, physically, and emotionally. And as I squeezed it with love, every time the anger started to manifest, I squeezed it with love. Every time that hurt came up as if it was present day, I squeezed it with love. And every time that thing tried to come up because it makes you feel like it's your fault because you didn't say nothing, I squeezed it with love. And I utilized it. And I had been utilizing it all these years and didn't realize it. I can spot a pedophile a mile away, baby. I can smell your aroma in the air. That gut feeling that we get that you're not right. Don't worry about it. You go your way. All that stuff that I was able to, when I would get places and I would mentor young girls and I would tell their parent or their mother or whoever, hey, you might want to watch that person. Something not right about them. Your daughter's acting like that for a reason. Stop assuming she's screaming because she fast and she's not listening. Let's find out what's going on. And I began to realize that I was able to empower and encourage others based off a hurt that I had. But I wasn't able to empower myself because I didn't allow myself to acknowledge that I had been wounded. And I want to come to y'all today and tell y'all that no matter what it looks like, you're looking at a true survivor. My father hung my mother over a balcony because she wanted to go to church. Me and my mother are 14 years apart. My mother had me when she was 14. My dad was very abusive to my mother, but when my father took his last breath, I was right there. I listened to stories of women in my family who had endured some hardships and things that nobody ever said anything else about. And that's when I began to realize, no, baby, we're not cursed. We're just silent. Those are two different things. And so I'm coming to y'all because there were times when I felt like I was going to lose my mind and I didn't know how to verbalize what was happening to me in my adult life. I didn't know how to explain that I could be sitting somewhere thinking about somebody and then they pop up. Because that thing was crying out. Because I grew up in the church and I would go to the altar because I'm assuming I got a fornicating demon because that's what I was taught. And all we were taught to do was prune hedges and never dig at something at the root. The evidence that they saw manifest the promiscuousness or the fornication, it was not the root of it. It was just a fruit. That was just a thing that came forward. Nobody ever knew how to address the seed, how to dig it up from the root. So I had to dig it up myself. And when I started digging, it was bigger than what I had thought because I realized it was generations of entanglement that had trapped me. And I decided that I would never allow anyone to come in my presence and I sense it, see it, and smell it and not acknowledge it. And I'm still digging, y'all, and I'm cutting and I'm burning stuff up from the root, pulling it up every day. But I want you to understand something, that if when I say my ugly honey, learning disability, struggling to read, but I run a business, became a certified life coach, able to encourage and empower others so they can evolve. But if I had let that thing keep me down, if I had let that thing tell me that I'd be no better than where I was right at that moment, I'd be still stuck. But because of the evil that had been placed in my life, I utilized those moments, not even realizing it, to empower others. I have this ability to go beyond what it is that I see. So a lot of times I come in contact with young girls who are like strippers and different lifestyles that many of you may not agree with. Many of us may not agree with. And I remember, I always say funny stuff like this, like, well, okay, you good at making dance routines. Okay, why don't you become a choreographer? Why don't you get everybody's stuff? Like, you can't just live in this moment. Think beyond that moment. If whatever you're going to do, don't let nobody else come in and control you while you do it. No, you run it. So I want you to be encouraged. I want you to see what it looks like to be an overcomer. And how do I overcome a thing? Is when you give a testimony. Because that means that that thing no longer stands in front of you and controls you, but it's behind you and you only allow it out when you want it out. And I am a witness. I am a living testament. And this isn't just somebody, you don't just have to be a Christian but this is for anybody who's ever been placed in the position that I've been placed in. I want you to be encouraged, but I want you to be empowered. There are so many organizations out there that help young women and young men who've been molested, who've been violated, who've been placed in a position where you're not even sure how you got here. I want you to know that you can make it. I've had to take ugly things in my life and realize that those are the things that made me unique, genuine love, and simply me. My ugly things empowered me to empower others. My ugly things encouraged me to encourage others. My ugly things gave me the strength to run. And if I had to look back, it was to pull somebody else who might have fell down, honey. When you realize that that very thing, that ugly thing, that thing you don't want to address, that thing you don't want to talk about, that See, in our darkest hours are some of our greatest victories. And a lot of times we always say, I'm looking for the light at the end of the tunnel. Change that. It's light in this tunnel. Because as long as I'm in here, I'm going to find a way and make a way out of nowhere. Nowhere. And some of us been in the dark so long, we've become blind. No, adjust. You know how they have animals that live in dark places that they become acclimated to that environment. Let's get up out of here. I'm going to adjust my eyesight so I can see better. Whatever it takes for you to get out. Get out. And I want you to know that at the end of the day, you will be your greatest enemy and your greatest ally. I choose to be the greatest ally I can be. So don't give up on yourself. Don't allow what somebody else did to keep anger harbored in your heart, because it'll destroy you. Because most violators stay violators, honey. They not sorry. But if you're able to see this today and you've made it, I want you to take that milestone and look in the mirror and say, you know what? I survived. I'm 40 years old. I have to do that to this day. Be like, you know what, girl, you survived. So know this, that we all have ugly situations. Everybody. How you embrace it will empower you. Thank you.